In this Podslice summary of the Diary of a CEO podcast, the guest Jada Pinkett Smith, a noted Hollywood actress, opens up about harrowing experiences from her early life to host Stephen Bartlett. Raised by teenage parents who grappled with drug addiction, Pinkett Smith recounts how she grew up feeling unimportant as her parents' addiction took precedence over her well-being. She discloses how this sense of insignificance slowly led her to a path of self-destructive behavior until a life-threatening incident served as a wake-up call. Understanding the importance of parental love and guidance, Pinkett Smith mentions how her grandmother stepped in and became her guiding light, helping her realize her self-worth. She discusses the loneliness and the constant quest for identity, validation, and self-worth she experienced in her formative years. Pinkett Smith delves into the perils of substance abuse and how it wreaked havoc on her parents' lives and her upbringing. The profound impact of her parents' lifestyle choices is vividly seen when she recounts the conversation with her father at the tender age of 7, when he confessed that he couldn't be a father due to his addiction and criminal activities. Despite this turbulent upbringing, she found an escape and a form of expression in the arts. From an early age, she wanted to be an actress, allowing her to channel her intense emotions through her performances. Acting served as a cathartic outlet for Pinkett Smith, since it offered her validation and a medium to express emotions which could not be vented at home. Further into the conversation, Pinkett Smith speaks about how past traumas, even those inherited or learned, tend to leave an indelible mark on individuals. She refers to her own journey and how understanding her mother's experiences helped her understand herself better. She also credits her mother's honesty about past violence and trauma, emphasizing that understanding it helped shape her own identity. Towards the end of this portion of the podcast, she introspects on the feeling of unworthiness she grew up with because of her parents' deep-seated addiction. And her journey, she concludes, has been about understanding and overcoming preconceived notions about her self-worth imposed by others' addictions. Embarking on a discussion about her transition from early life struggles to later career moves, Pinkett Smith shares candid details about her entry into the street life. Influenced by high rollers and hustlers in her community, she resolved to create a stable and secure life for herself, which led to her involvement in drug dealing. She recalls how this turbulent period groomed her to thrive amidst adversity, a skill that would later be instrumental in her Hollywood career. She expresses her absence of fear and her self-assurance in ruling her world, implying that her previous encounters with real threats made Hollywood power flexes seem almost juvenile. Yet she acknowledges that the edgy persona she developed for survival clashed with her early experiences in Hollywood. Speaking about her initial transition into Hollywood, Pinkett Smith opens up about the refreshing but sometimes standoffish impression she made due to her around-the-edges demeanor. She talks about learning to reveal different aspects of herself, underlining the importance of showing vulnerability and strength in equal measure. Referencing a pivotal conversation she had with actor Warren Beatty, she recalls how his advice of letting people see her charm truly resonated with her. Discussing her mental and emotional state during this transition, Pinkett Smith speaks of her feeling of being unlovable. This feeling led her to put up defensive walls, inadvertently making it harder for her to form genuine connections. To this day, she still grapples with her defensive instinct, recognizing it as a product of her formative years. As Pinkett Smith relives some of her life's sobering experiences, she exhibits her fearlessness and resilience, forging her path through both life-threatening events and emotional turmoil. Her experiences have taught her valuable life lessons about survival, resilience, and self-worth, allowing her to navigate the challenging world of Hollywood with a grounded perspective. Even in her ascension to stardom, her past remains an integral part of her persona, shaping her actions, decisions, and ultimately her incredible journey. Pinkett Smith then delves deeper into her interpersonal relationships, sharing the story of how she met the iconic rapper and close friend Tupac Shakur. Their encounter happened on her first day at the Baltimore School for the Arts, where Tupac was already creating a buzz due to his charismatic personality. The two instantly connected, forming a bond that wasn't romantic but deeply intimate. They had a nuanced understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses, often managing to breach their mutual defensive walls without causing offense. Pinkett Smith cherished this soul-to-soul connection, acknowledging how they both shared an emotionally intellectual intimacy which they couldn't translate into a physical relationship. Speaking about Tupac's authenticity, Pinkett Smith discusses how the rapper uniquely connected with his audience. His unmatched ability to join his listeners emotionally, speak about real-life experiences in an authentic manner, and his multidimensional persona significantly contributed to his massive significance in the rap genre. In her narrative, Pinkett Smith then shifts the focus onto her move to LA and recalls her first encounters with Will Smith. Initially unattracted and unimpressed by him due to his seemingly shallow demeanor and untroubled persona, she eventually saw a different side to him that was both ambitious and joyful, yet grounding. His adaptability, the ability to fit in anywhere from the hood to the White House, was something that drew Pinkett Smith towards him. She also remembers rejecting Will Smith's proposition to play his on-screen girlfriend due to her desire to make movies, making a reference to her past time on the TV show A Different World. Despite the security that the role offered, Pinkett Smith rejected it, emphasizing her risk-taking nature and her unwillingness to be restrained from exploring her potential in the realm of film. During the podcast, Pinkett Smith confides about a crucial and difficult time in her life, her early 20s, which she describes as her first major personal breakdown, or earthquake. Despite the significant advancements made in mental health awareness and psychiatry today, at that time, Pinkett Smith found herself completely unprepared and confused about the sudden emotional flood that had overtaken her. This confusion primarily stemmed from two factors: a lack of understanding and awareness about mental health issues, particularly among African Americans, and the cultural stigma around discussing or addressing such problems. Pinkett Smith reflects on the terrifying moment when she was overcome by an intense and unexplainable rush of emotions. Unable to comprehend the sudden change going on in her, she became overwhelmed by severe fear, anger, and despair, leaving her feeling suicidal. She emphasizes her struggle by saying that her brain couldn't essentially catch up with what her body was experiencing, underlining the terrifying confusion she felt in those moments. She subsequently reached out to her mother, who was able to help her, and sought therapy. However, even though she got the help she needed, she kept her situation hidden from her professional acquaintances. Although she was recommended to psychiatry and prescribed Prozac, she still insisted on keeping it moving. This reflects her strong determination not to let the incident influence her career or to show any perceived weakness to others. This endurance mirrors the societal pressure she felt as a black woman to keep pushing forward in the face of life's adversities, a narrative she felt was expected of her to maintain. Pinkett Smith also highlights the lack of conversation around mental health in her community, where mental health issues and suicide was considered a white people thing, thereby making her feel even more isolated in her struggles. She felt nobody else around her understood what she was going through, further deepening her confusion and despair. Pinkett Smith then discusses her decision to relocate back to Baltimore, intending to keep working while fading from the Hollywood scene. She bought a farmhouse and planned to create a peaceful life for herself in a quiet corner, flying between LA or New York for auditions as needed. It was around this time that Will Smith contacted her, having just received his divorce papers. However, her connection with Tupac continued, and she recounts how, while he was in prison, he proposed marriage to her. This proposal, described in a deeply emotional letter written during his sentence, illustrates Tupac's profound love and admiration for Pinkett Smith, further attesting to their meaningful bond. This letter serves as a poignant reminder of their deep connection, a bond which remained unbroken despite the challenging circumstances both were facing. It was this same bond which led to the pair's biggest ever fight shortly before Tupac's untimely death. Pinkett Smith shares how the argument centered around Tupac's way of life, which she feared was leading him down a destructive path. Although explicit details of this fight are not revealed, it is evident that it led to a temporary fallout between the two, with Pinkett Smith admitting that they were not speaking at the time of Tupac's death. Her recollection of the incident, especially the regret over not reconciling with Tupac before his death, serves as a bitter reminder of how abrupt endings can often leave deep-rooted feelings of guilt and grief. Despite their fallout, Pinkett Smith confirms that Tupac knew about her deep feelings for him before his death, further underscoring the depth of their connection. In this part of the conversation, Pinkett Smith expounds on her relationship with the late rapper Tupac Shakur and the impact his death had on her. She emotionally shares how she regretted letting pride and ego come between them, which resulted in their final argument and not speaking to each other before Tupac's untimely death. Don't hold on to that prideful part of yourself, she advises listeners, elucidating the importance of setting aside ego in maintaining relationships. She shifts gradually to her sense of loss when Tupac's mother called her while she was on film set, informing her that Tupac was in a coma. She didn't rush, thinking he'd recover like he always did, but when her friend came to deliver the news of his death, a clearly emotional Pinkett Smith knew instinctively that something terrible had happened. She also reveals how she is still wrestling with grief and has yet to fully understand how to navigate it. The conversation changes directions when she discusses another profound loss, that of her close friend Maxine, who committed suicide. From a place of loss and pain, Pinkett Smith has come to find strength and connection. In fact, her experience with Tupac allowed her to support Lauren London, Nipsey Hussle's widow, in her time of grief, thereby highlighting the interconnectedness of shared trauma and healing. She then provides valuable insights into how pain leads to understanding and depth, stating that heartbreak breaks you open and allows you a choice to dive into darkness or strive towards light. She shares how she chooses to find the light in every painful experience and use it as a launching pad rather than a stopping point. Despite her outward success, Pinkett Smith opens up about being spiritually bankrupt during parts of her life. Interestingly, she brings up how different love languages played a role in conflicts in her relationship with her husband, Will Smith. While he believed providing materially would signify his love, she craved emotional connection, reflecting how differing expectations could lead to complications in relationships. Nonetheless, Pinkett Smith offers a hopeful view, expressing that neither of their perspectives was wrong, and stresses upon finding a balance in yin and yang. Pinkett Smith resonates with Bartlett's admission of postponing connection for career success, and reminds him that on a deathbed, what matters most is love given and received. Bartlett concedes to her point and acknowledges her wisdom, admitting his excuses for not focusing more on his personal relationships. As the conversation continues, Pinkett Smith delves into the struggle she experienced in maintaining her own identity within her marriage to Will Smith. Encapsulating this struggle is a feeling of resentment towards her husband's very different vision for their shared happiness. She was assisting him in achieving his dreams, repeatedly sacrificing her needs and desires for an emotional connection. She mentions the false notion she harbored of pouring into him and his dreams in the hopes of getting what she desired in return, which she later comprehended as a self-abandonment. Pinkett Smith underscores her journey of self-discovery through a phrase she coins as the exiled lands, where she had to face her fears and preconceived notions about life, marriage, herself, and her image of a perfect wife. By choosing to embrace her imperfections, she found joy and dismantled the Hollywood-induced need for outward perfection. Fast-forwarding to a darker period in Pinkett Smith's life, she shares about the state of discontent, bordering on depression she found herself in around her 40th birthday. With the external world perceiving her as having everything one could desire, she was left in inner turmoil, feeling shame and confusion about her unhappiness. There wasn't much discussion around mental health, as she mentions, adding to her struggles. In this grim phase, she shockingly admits to contemplating ending her life, going as far as planning it to look like an accident. Ultimately, Pinkett Smith sees this dire internal crisis as a calling for something to die that was not her per se. It was a desperate plea from her psyche to break the cycle of self-loathing she had unknowingly entered. The realization came about during an ayahuasca intervention, a traditional spiritual medicine, which she credits for creating awareness about her self-destructive mental patterns. She concludes by expressing the importance of surrender in her life journey, the surrendering of who she thinks she is and what she thinks she knows, to a power higher than her. The essence of these wisdom-filled narratives is resonated in Pinkett Smith's Red Table Conversations, where she courageously continues to share her deep hurts, healings, and insights with public transparency. In the podcast's flow, Pinkett Smith delves deeper into the aspects of codependency, the impacts of public perception, and the events at the Oscars. She speaks about the period in her life when she felt she was displaying strong, codependent tendencies, which both her loved ones and a therapist noticed. These tendencies, coupled with her self-sacrificing martyrdom behavior, affected those around her deeply. The conversation then transitions to the infamous incident involving her husband Will and Chris Rock at the Oscars. Pinkett Smith initially thought Will's slap to Chris was a rehearsed skit, not realizing the reality until much later. She talks about the public's reaction, noting how even her eye roll was dissected and analyzed by people, speculating it was a cue to Will. She further clarifies the bond between herself and Will during that time, affirming they were there as a family, but weren't romantically together. Their mutual respect and understanding remained intact nonetheless, enabling her to handle the public scrutiny in the aftermath. She expresses surprise at the overwhelming reaction from the public, realizing its magnitude only as it unfolded. Responding to Bartlett's question about whether she saw Will's protective behavior as an act of love, Pinkett Smith comments on the complexity of the situation. She acknowledges that in his unique way, Will was protecting her, but it was a layered response provoked by more than just the immediate incident. She insinuates the act was influenced by his feelings towards emancipation and his history dating back to the 80s with Chris Rock. She thanks Bartlett for providing a safe haven to express her feelings candidly. The host, in return, expresses gratitude for her book's wisdom, citing the narration style, vulnerability, and the quest for truth as impressive. He commends Pinkett Smith for not catering to a self-serving narrative, but showing the courage to relive her painful steps. Bartlett deepens his admiration for Pinkett Smith's book, labeling it as one of the best he's read. He hails her vivid storytelling, which made him feel he was a silent observer during her frightening panic attack and in her grandmother's garden. He praises her for making the conscious choice to embrace her vulnerability and seek the truth, rather than choosing the easy way out by painting a comfortable image of herself. Finally, at the end of the podcast, Bartlett thanks Pinkett Smith for creating a safe space for raw emotions at her red table and for being a source of wisdom that navigates people through their life's course. The episode concludes with a promotional slot for Huel, a nutritionally balanced meal replacement product, which Bartlett recommends from personal experience. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.